FDA's Computer Software Assurance Guidance Data Integrity. Please make sure to look out for an email after the webinar containing the slides as well as information to register for our next webinar. Our presenters today will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. You can ask these questions throughout the webinar, the questions tab on your sidebar on GoToWebinar. Any questions we do not get to, Connects will provide those to the speaker, and we will be distributing the entire list after the webinar to all attendees. If you have any technical issues, please send a text in the question or chat tab in the GoToWebinar platform or call GoToWebinar directly at 888-646-0014. My name is John Tochi and I manage partnerships for Connects. Connects is a leading educational partner showcasing innovative processes and technology for the GMP and validation environments. I'm happy to be here with you for this webinar today. One of our conferences that's coming up, CSA, Connects has closely followed this evolution and understand that industry wants to move from theoretical discussion to practical implementation, case studies, and examples. Although the guidance has yet to be released, FDA and the FISA team indicated this initiative should be implemented immediately. Please look out for a special discount for this training. There's also currently an early bird discount for next Friday, April 1st as well. I'd like to take a minute. Our partner of today is Compliance Group. Compliance Group is a trusted global quality compliance consulting firm with 15+ years of experience serving GXP regulated industries. Our mission is to improve client outcomes through innovative solutions that enhance product quality and regulatory compliance, reducing cost and time to market. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers, Al Musali, Seneca Toms, Francisco Vicente, Ken Shinemoto.
Great. Thank you, John. Righty. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Can you all see my screen?
You just have to hit present, Cal.
Yes, sir.
It's not a presenter mode.
Am I in presenter mode?
No.
Not yet.
Okay. Sorry. Technical difficulties already. Okay. Maybe we'll bring this guy over here. Share my. Okay, we're sharing it. That's good. And please let me know. Awesome. Good. All right. It's interesting when you have multiple screens. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. This is really a special, definitely a special webinar for me specifically, working together with these experts in the industry, not only expert in the industry, but they're the government. So thank you very much for joining me, Seneca and Cisco. I know it took a lot of work just to get you to really attend here, and I understand your busy day, so I truly appreciate you. That really shows you did not do it for Khaled, you did it for the industry, and I really appreciate it if you're doing that. Ken Shitamoto is always willing and to help and provide guidance and knowledge to the industry. So again, thank you, Ken. What I'm going to do, just pass it on to Chris to introduce. I definitely like to give my guest the ultimate value here to really let the industry know who they are, their background. I think it's very important, not just to them, but to me and to the industry to know who's really speaking and from a trusted source. So, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Cal. And also want to thank Connects for giving us this platform with our friends at the FDA today to really talk about the value, the experiences, and how CSA can help your business moving forward. So we'll go left to right. Cisco Vicente, some of you may know from previous CSA calls. Cisco's the program manager case for quality within the CDRH organization under FDA. He's got tons of experience, began at the FDA as a compliance officer within the cardiac rhythm and electrophysiology branch in the Office of Compliance at CDRH. Cisco, welcome to today's presentation.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for the opportunity, I think, to really engage and maybe answer questions that people have had, or at least we hear across the board multiple times. So it's a great opportunity.
And we want to especially welcome Lieutenant Seneca Toms to today's discussion. We really do appreciate his time and opportunity to have this discussion with him. He is the U.S. Public Health Service Commission officer, served as the drug national expert within the FDA's Officer of Regulatory Affairs. Seneca, welcome to today's discussion.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to a good discussion today. Thank you.
And of course, our FICSA friend, which Cal will talk about in a little bit, Ken Shitamoto. Ken, we really do appreciate the opportunity to have you on the panel as well. Ken, you're with Gilead, Senior Director of IT. You are part of the FICSA team. You've got a BA in Molecular Cell Biology as well as an MS in Computer Science from the University of California, Berkeley, as well as San Jose University. You are an avid supporter. I don't want to forget this. An avid supporter of the American Lung Association. Please donate, folks, when you have the opportunity to do so. He's done a lot of great work with him and his daughter. Ken, welcome to today's discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And last but not least, our moderator today from the compliance group team, our Executive Vice President of Client Relations, Khaled Masali, who is also one of the founding fathers of the CSA revolution and also part of the FICSA team. Khaled, the floor is now yours, sir, for this riveted discussion. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Chris. And thank you to Chris. He's our Director of Marketing, and I appreciate you also and all the work you've done with us. Thank you. Great. Hopefully I won't have any issues here. As I always start every webinar, again, without these folks here on the names that you're seeing on the screen, the whole CSA concept was never really born, right? Of course, big thanks to Cisco for his support for this entire team and the work that we've been doing. And let me tell you, I don't want to be in Cisco's shoes because it's a big shoes to fill. He's always taking our complaints and taking them back and forth. And we came up with tons of recommendation, went into that CSA Draft Guidance, which is going to lead me to a question that I'm sure Cisco is waiting for. So is the industry, and I think about 403 people now waiting to hear from him. Is it released to Cisco or not yet?
I think you'd hear a bigger fanfare if it were released. I think I'd be the first one trumping it around the board. It's been a long time running, but it is, again, significantly down along its process. There's a lot of enthusiasm and support behind it internally. It's just, it is the process. It's what it is at that point in time. But, I think it's, something to keep an eye out for. It is on our commitment. Again, our center director, I know, is fully supportive. It hopefully will be out soon, but when it does, one of the things that we'd like to encourage is, again, feedback on it, right? One of the things that we're always striving for is, does this really address what the concerns are that people are feeling or experiencing, right? So when it comes out, you'll hear more of that, and there'll probably be another webinar where I'll get a chance to say again, please give us feedback on it. It is planned and hopefully coming soon.
Sounds great. I think the next time when it gets released, we'll have a very similar webinar, but with disco lights.
Oh yeah, I'll have one here somewhere.
I started with my hair was dark, by the way, but it's okay. Just a reminder for folks who are joining us for the first time, I'm not going to go through anything. This is not totally about what CSA is. It's a concept. It's a methodology. You will have these slide decks. Really, the topic today is going to be basically a roundtable questions with my colleagues from the FDA and from Gilead. And again, it's the FDA and the industry, right? So we want to make sure that we have some discussion, but then we're going to leave about 15 to 20 minutes for the industry to ask questions directly to Seneca from ORA. For those of you who know who our ORA is the Office of Regulatory Affairs. So some of you may see Seneca's face at their site one of these days. I'm not threatening you here. This is a young man who has an open mind, and we should not be afraid of the FDA. We should work together with the FDA. So again, this is what CSA is all about. I'm not going to go through it. What I really want to jump into what the objective is. And I stole this slide from a good friend at ISPE, Sean Wynn. Really, the objective is to encourage, the whole objective of CSA, right, is to encourage innovation and technological advance. And I love the way he put it, while avoiding unacceptable risk to product quality, patient safety. And that's really what we've been talking about for years, right? Of course, in public health. Because as we innovate, technological advances can improve data integrity that we are still having issues with, and I will have some discussions around that. And promote better use of data of the benefit of the patient. And as you can see, we've got the word patient in the two statements here. It's all about the patient, right? Patient safety and product quality. And that's really what CSA is all about. That's the risk we assess when we're building or configuring or customizing any systems. So now we're gonna kind of open the floor here. We've got a panicked manufacturer, right? Often the FDA comes to inspect your facility for reasons other than computer system validation, because technically, and I think Cisco and Seneca can vouch for that, and maybe I'll pause here and maybe ask that question. Do you gentlemen usually go into facility, hey, show me your system right away? I don't think so. But go ahead, please, Seneca.
No, that is generally correct. In my experience, I've never shown up at a firm and asked that question at the top of the inspection. We're there to evaluate the manufacturing quality system for that facility. CSV or the state of the systems is just an inherent part of what we look at during an inspection. So we're not there. And interestingly enough, I don't even use that terminology. I don't say, show me your CSV very often. I just say, show me what it is that you do to ensure that your system works the way it's supposed to work. And how is that meeting CGMP requirements?
Okay, Cisco?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to highlight that I can't express enough in terms of all these webinars that we've done, how excited I am that Seneca's here. Again, people will get a chance to hear it from that perspective, not just me speaking and saying it on this side, but never is it really the case that we've gone into a facility looking for the computer system validation, right? That's not the business we're in. We're in the business of the patient safety, right? It's that focus that we go in there for. We go, as Seneca said, is the system intact? How's it performing? What's happening there? Typical are surveillance inspections, product approvals, right? Is everything ready for the new product that's going to be, delivered to patients? And then again, is there a safety issue, right? That's really what we're in there for. The technology that's being applied and used is part of that delivery, and when it's relevant, that's when the investigators will pursue it.
Great. Ken, you want to add any salt and pepper on this?
Yeah, I mean, in personal experience, it just doesn't happen. They don't evaluate the validity of my lot or my processes by validation, right? They don't go like, show me the testing around the CSIG. They're going to go look in context for that record. Now, if there's something that causes them to look at, okay, I see discrepancies, then they'll start doing a deep dive. But then other than that, it's typically show me, okay, this isn't valid. Val plan, val summary. Again, if I see a discrepancy that's unexplained, then they may look, but it's, do you really understand what validation is? That is generally, in all my years of experience, where we've been. So.
I think you're an FDA undercover. It sounds like it, because you know a lot about this stuff. All right. So really what I wanted to add in here, and what it looks like that many, because organizations, they feel now if we automate Now we're even inviting the FDA even more to come to us, right? And that's another place. It's not just about the validation. It's just about, yeah, but now the more systems we have, and we know that the FDA, they have more investigators and smart people are joining them. Maybe we should not really automate. Let me stay on my paper, because you know what? If I have all these stack of paper, I can blind them. And when they see all these stacks of paper, they walk away, right? So I guess, Seneca, would you actually, what is your preference when you go into a facility, right? Would your preference to have someone coming in with a cart of documentation, or just really showing you a little MacBook, because I know you don't like PC. So a MacBook telling you what's going on.
So let's see, there's a difference between my professional preference and my personal preference, but in either case, I'm not looking for a ton of data. I'm looking for sufficient data. I'm looking for the quality over quantity, always quality over quantity. And however someone is taking their system, and many firms still today use paper, some use all electronic, and a lot of places are kind of in between. But for me, in my experience, I'm looking for, does your system work? And what do you have to show me that your system works? And it doesn't have to be a cart. And yes, I've seen many of carts where there's 25 volumes of paper. That's not my priority, to go through 25 volumes of paper, because reading 25 volumes of paper is not going to tell me anything more about your quality than if you gave me something that was much, much shorter. I'm looking for the evidence. I'm looking for, did you do what you said you were going to do? Did you meet your requirements? And do you have evidence to support that you meet those requirements? And then the bigger picture is what you did in line to meet what is in the regulations. If you're meeting those criteria, you can do it electronically, you can do it with paper, you can do it anywhere in between. There are a lot of benefits of having the electronic systems and having paper. There's a big push for innovation and making things more efficient, and electronic data helps that to happen. If that system's executed correctly, appropriately, and in a manner that is meeting the regulations, then by all means, for me, I'd prefer that, because you're working more efficiently, which means you're working towards, you can focus more time and energy on patient safety and the product that's going out the door. And it also will reduce the amount of time that I need to read those 24 binders.
Cisco, sounds like you have something to add, maybe?
No, I couldn't, agree more, but I do want to make sure it's noted that even if we've got an increase in investigators, I think people underestimate the tidal wave of work that they are up against. I think a while back I did some math in terms of, even with some of the new programs, policies, and everything else, given the resources, even if we got an increase in resources to get out there on inspections, I think it would be, maybe 25 years if we actually went as an investigator every day to every facility before we'd get through the inventory of things that they've got to get through. So, that isn't the rationale, right? It's the fact that these systems, people are recognizing the value to. They're really driving towards it. And in these cases, we want to make sure that where it's relevant, there's time and focus put into the understanding that the system's meeting its needs. And I know that Seneca just voiced it, but I also have a similar mindset, right? The moment I get a huge dump of binders and paperwork, either one or two things comes into my head. It's something's being hidden, and now I'm just given the haystack to find the needle in, or the other aspect of it, the question wasn't understood, right? And there isn't a clear way to explain to me how they assured the system. So that's where I kind of take it one way or the other. That succinct, easy to communicate, here's why this was done and why it mattered, is often the best approach.
And I want to add a little bit more into that about the volume of information and how it's presented. So oftentimes in my past, in the inspections that I've done, I have been given a behemoth of information in a very non-efficient manner. And it is then their expectation, and I guess as in the course of me trying to do my job of protecting the public, to go through that information. But what I often in my mind question and think about is, if it is this hard for me to get the answer to one question today, how are you on a routine basis going through this data and getting all the answers you need to make sure that the product, that the manufacturing process, the quality system is working? Because if it takes me a half a day to get the answer to one question, how are you getting the answers to 10 questions, 20 questions a day that you need to do your job of making sure that the system's working appropriately?
Awesome. And by no means, I don't think Seneca or Cisco saying to the industry, hey, look, if you're stacking all those, you're doing a bad job. No, I think they're just telling you, let's be efficient, right? Automate. Automation is the right thing to do, specifically when it comes to, I guess, CSV or CSA. It's the fact less is better, right? And just focus on technology. And that's really, again, it goes back to the objective that we started out with earlier. Now, this is going to take us a little bit further in terms of inspection ready manufacturer, where they could literally say, you know, our CSV program is ready and strong. We developed a CSV process following risk-based approach aligned with ISPE GAMP, good practice guide, and of course the upcoming. We decided to early adopt the CSA methodology to start realizing the value. Okay, I did not make this up. I got it really from my manufacturer. Again, we support a lot of our clients, and some of them, they're ready with these statements. They're so confident that they're doing the right thing. And I believe, and this is my opinion, but then of course I'm going to ask the expert from the FDA, when you speak to a manufacturer that has this attitude, what is your reaction? And Cisco.
So I think, first of all, that's a great attitude to bring. I mean, I always highlight to people that the inspection, where people kind of tend to panic, honestly, that's your opportunity to show off. Really take it, show them why it is that you're doing what you're doing, why it is important, and that you are confident in the output and the results, right? End of the day, you as a manufacturer are the expert in your product and your system, right? You know, the FDA is bringing in the expertise on the policy that's required, the expertise on the regulations, but the idea of, you know, how that all comes together, that's what that opportunity for discussion happens, right? That exchange between the FDA and the actual experts who are in the room from the company. I like that that's the case and they're ready to go. And I think, as we've said multiple times in previous sessions, nothing in what we're saying in CSA as it's coming out is new. Nothing. I'm sure people will be shockingly surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the first comments we get back are, well, this is not new. Got it. We've been saying that, right? The ISPE GAMP work already highlights and was well underway in terms of stating a lot of that concept and process that you could apply and think about. So the idea of moving forward, yeah, I think companies should be going forward with that, and that they should be using this approach to help make their process faster and get these, you know, access to data, technology, and systems to make the product better down the road, implemented and moving. Don't necessarily wait for the agency.
Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I like to think of it as, you know, we all know, and if we all read guidance, it always says this is our current thinking on things, and it's a way to help industry understand. But really, the FDA has already put out what they expect, and that is the regulations. And so I like to think of it as almost like a destination, right? There's a destination. We're not going to tell you how to exactly get there. Sometimes we'll give you guidance, but this is the destination. How you choose to get there is your choice. You may go different ways. Some of those ways you might go, we may have issues with if they're not scientifically sound, if you don't have the data to support. And again, when I say data to support, an adequate amount of data, not more data than you need, not less, just right, kind of the Goldilocks principle there. You want to have the data to support what you're doing. It should be scientifically sound, but you don't always have to, how do I put it? The guidance is there to give you an idea of what we're doing or what we're thinking right now, but that's right now, and that's kind of a static thing that happens from time to time. But technology is always advancing, and the expectation is you stay current, right? So if you have a guidance document that we look at, well, for example, related to Part 11. Part 11 guidance document was written like, I think about 20 years ago, okay? A lot has changed in 20 years. You don't have to say, okay, I'm gonna have to do exactly the same way this document from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 1 year ago, whatever the time period is, I'm gonna stick to that and not advance. The agency's not telling you that. The agency's not saying wait for us to tell you how to do your job. We're telling you, get to the destination, get there in an appropriate, scientifically sound manner, prove that you got there in an appropriately and scientifically sound manner. But if you don't know, some people are really bad with directions. And so we say, hey, here's a way that you can get there, but you don't have to wait there. Wait until we give you that to start your journey, because you should have already started your journey the moment you decided to start manufacturing products.
Ken, any insight?
Yeah, everything in CSA was already there. Use critical thinking. I mean, it's like data integrity. When did we not expect data integrity? Whether it was paper or whether it's electronic, it was always there. In GAMP, they talked about take screenshots when it adds value. If you're writing a test case, the amount of scripting is proportional to your need for repeatability, the need to challenge a specific case in a consistent, repeatable fashion. And that's, usually most of the high-risk requirements have that, but you could have a high-risk requirements like just push a button. And that doesn't necessarily need to have a detailed skip. It's where you need to use your thinking. And where the concern is how that the guidance, I think what Seneca says, like they don't enforce based on guidance, enforce on regulation, statutes, right? That's where the compliance ruler is. And we need to quit hiding behind these standards or the guidance, because it's almost like we're hiding, like these are, if I do this, I fulfill my legal obligation. If I do this, I fulfill my moral obligation, and we don't innovate. We have like a 3x3 tables that we've used forever, and we don't even use all of GAMP, we just use one section. And CSA is kind of broadening it, apply that critical thinking, and we just as industry need to move forward and innovate, because that's what we need, especially as the world is becoming more technological. As the earlier comments, right? Automation is here. Things are moving forward. Other industries are now talking not about using AI in testing.
And so I know both yourself and Cisco mentioned GAMP and GAMP 5. Maybe this is an opportunity to really announce also that GAMP 5 second edition is coming to theater near you. It will be issued in July, so keep an eye on that. There's a lot, chapters after chapters, discussing critical thinking. Maybe they're not calling it CSA, right? Again, I've always said it, CSA is the sexy label for GAMP 5. But again, critical thinking, it should be really the very first thing. And thank you, Seneca, for mentioning the destination, right? To me, I've heard it once that it's you're making a meal, right? But you don't have the full recipe, right? And I don't think the FDA is going to give the full recipe of how to build this entire system, right? They're going to give you some guidance, right? So I think, to me, guidances are recipes, but again, not every guidance is going to give you all the recipe. There's that little secret sauce, right?
Well, and I think also to that, just consider that we're trying to give a recipe for everyone, and everyone's needs, taste, everything is different, right? So you're going to get the very basics of what it takes to get you into the ballpark, but you should be tweaking that for what your needs are.
One thing on critical thinking though, Khaled, because critical thinking, they have weak and strong. Weak is looking at an argument in the context of what is, which are current practices. That's where people tend to do. They look in like, hey, I currently do this. This is something new, and they kind of compare. Strong critical thinking is taking the whole space and looking at everything in context and saying like, including what your current practices are, and think critically about that. That's where I think CSA has the power that Gamp alluded to in the past. Look at the life cycle, but people don't generally look at the whole life cycle. They think validation, all it is testing. Anytime there's a miss, let's just have more test cases. And that propagates it. So when we look at the critical thinking, it's looking at everything in context. That's the strong critical thinking. That's the one that's going to take us to the destination that Seneca talked about. We have a goal. We reevaluate everything that we do in that context to ensure that we can achieve it.
Awesome. I'm going to switch topic a little bit from CSA because it's boring, right? CSA, CSV, validation, schmalidation. Look, it's up to you, industry. You want to do it, do it. You don't, it's all up to you, right? What I really want to switch to a little bit, combine a little bit with data integrity. There is some panic manufacturers when it comes to data integrity, and we continue to have some data integrity issues, right? So regulatory agencies have cited deficiencies in GMP data integrity and data management for at least the past 15 years. Well, it's going to be more than that. Yet it appears that the industry as a whole has made limited progress in self-identifying and remediating these deficiencies. Why do you think the industry continues to face this? Is it modernization? Again, to your point earlier, Ken, yes, it could be, paper or electronic. Is it we're relying too much on vendor, and yet we don't have the right controls in place? So I'd like to really, gentlemen, to hear your insight on that.
I would say it's kind of multifactorial. There's many different things that are probably contributing to it. The first thing I like to step back and say what I always say is, when I'm approaching data integrity, I don't look at it as an electronic issue. It is not an electronic issue. I have a saying, it doesn't matter if you're talking, your system is paper-based, you're using a paper tablet, electronic tablet, or a stone tablet. The principles of data integrity apply, period. So we have to stop looking at it, or I don't want to say stop looking at it, but I don't look at it from a method of our technology-based usage. So that's one thing. I think some of the problems is just not understanding data integrity as in a whole. I think another part of it is when it comes to those systems that are related to that are electronic, it's sort of like a little bit like being more cars on the road. There's probably many more speeding tickets that are given out today than there were 100 years ago because there's more cars on the road. The cause is not that there's more cars on the road. It's just there are people who are in those cars who don't know how to appropriately drive, right? They're the ones that are speeding. So it's not the technology that is causing the issue. It's the individuals. It's the systems that are behind the scenes driving those cars, and in an example of manufacturing, driving those processes that have issues that need to be resolved. So I don't think it's, you can't point and say, I cannot point and say that it's the technology that's causing it. I think it's the implementation. A lot of that can stem from, I like to say it, outsourcing our common sense, which is something we shouldn't do. We should never outsource our common sense. If we're outsourcing things, if we're depending on things, we need to still think critically about what we're doing, right? So if we're looking at those things and we're approaching it from the perspective of what is the risk, what can go wrong, and how do I mitigate that appropriately, then those issues will go away. But again, I don't think it's because of technology that it's happening.
Thank you. Cisco?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to just reinforce what Seneca said, because the biggest issue I see around here that might be driving the deficiencies is that people have kind of confounded the technology aspect with data integrity, right? And data integrity is foundationally a business process. We need to keep this information, we need to keep it in some way, shape, or form that's usable, accessible, that's independent of the technology. And I think the biggest, there's one thing to have observations, and that's fair, right? But then the question comes back, and that's why we've got this process of investigators and compliance officers double check, is that really truly a violation, right? So when you look at the warning letter citations, where was the problem? It's hardly ever that the technology fundamentally was the issue. It was that business process failed in some way, shape, or form. So when I see the biggest, I guess, struggle in this case is that companies are treating them as one. And, I want to make sure that we own, because this is something that we need feedback on. If it's something that is also being driven by our side, but we're kind of confounding it and turning it into one, let us know so we can make that a much clearer distinction. When you do think about it as a business process, then technology becomes your enabler piece, and that's a different and easier way to look at things than this big bundled up activity.
Thank you, Cisco.
Just
Go ahead, Ken.
one thing to add, Khaled. It's not data integrity. It's not unique to our industry. All industries have, data that they need to ensure has integrity for their purposes and their tools and techniques. Where I think we have some problems is, as Cisco alluded just to, the tools and technology. I've been in places where we've had a tool that could do 100% verification of the data in the migration, and the decision is, no, we don't want to use that, because now we have to go out and qualify that tool. And that's where there's a complete priority inversion of what's important. What do they do? They said, like, oh, let's look at 10% of the records, let's use some statistical sampling methodology, when you have something that is better because they have a perceived, regulatory compliance burden that they've misinterpreted.
That's
Totally.
a phenomenal example of a misapplication of an opportunity right there.
That's a classic example, and you hear it day in, day out. And I've seen organizations, specifically in our line of work, working with various clients, the way they do sampling, for instance, and how they do data migration. And if you see that, you just smack your head. It's like, why, right? So to your point, well taken, Ken.
Well, I think in all of that, and this is probably a good point to bring up the idea and the example of, things that we've talked about and heard, but questions that we've been asked about, even just keystrokes, right? As part of that whole data integrity discussion, and using logging of keystrokes or, oh, there you go, right? I mean, it links entirely. It's a perfect example of the concept of data integrity versus the technology and what that means. I think from our standpoint, the expectation isn't that you're tracking every element of what happens when you touch your keys. It's when does that become a record? That's your data integrity portion. I don't know if Seneca's got anything to add on that. I think he's got a lot more of that perspective also on his side.
Yes, and when looking at this question and thinking about this, as Cisco said, it's not really important every time you press a key. The only caveat would be if that when you press a key, an action happens. So if pressing one key causes an action to happen in that quality system or in that manufacturing system, then it would be important to capture that, of course. But if every time we press a key to spell a word out, we're not committing to an action. It's not until we make that commit, we save that, right? That it really matters. And I think the capturing every keystroke will basically serve the purpose of illustrating how bad of spellers we are, because we always type stuff, we reword things, And then we make a commitment to that data, just like when you are using an electronic laboratory notebook. Every keystroke is not being recorded, because the question is why. That's the big thing here, and it goes back to that critical thinking. Why would you want to have every keystroke recorded? Now, if there is some valid reason that will impact the quality of a product, then of course, by all means. But if I was looking at this and I saw examples of where someone is not doing it versus someone that is, my question would be why? What is the difference? And that goes back to the purpose and the intended use. If every keystroke is critically important, by all means. But if you're trying to say complete, the fact that you typed a C and then an O and then a P instead of an M is not going to matter that much in the grand scheme of things when it comes to quality.
Thank you, gentlemen, because I think this has been a kind of dark cloud roaming around many labs and manufacturing, facilities, just asking that question. So thank you, Cisco, for actually mentioning it. But I want to go back to the tool validation thing that actually Ken was talking about. So I think this is another, and I see you, Cisco, smiling, because that is something that keeps coming up over and over and over again, right? Tools. Do you use tools for, to me, it's productivity tools, right? Why the burden? So it looks like you know what to say, Cisco. So go ahead.
No, and I think this is something that I'd like to also link up with other discussions that I think we've had, and I know Ken has highlighted, and we'll talk about in a second here. But that was a great example. There was an opportunity to use a much better tool to completely be certain that your data, again from a data integrity standpoint, it all starts to link, right? Was much better in that transfer process. The choice was that the perceived regulatory burden was high for the tool, so let's do a 10% sampling, put in risk in the the data transfer, enter all these extra elements of concern, and actually more manual work oftentimes than just the idea of implementing and applying the tool because of that burden. One of the things that we've been trying to do, and this is why it was key to highlight, there's a difference between the data integrity business process and the technology, right? That with CSA, the big ticket secret item that's in there is the idea of taking credit for work that's already done. In the case of a tool that is, something that is provided by a vendor, that's what it's known for. They've got a good track record. You probably assessed the vendor. You bring that tool in, you make sure it works in your system, the configuration works right. That's it. There isn't anything more that you need to do from a risk-based approach. That is considered validated for its use. Go forth and do it. There isn't a lot of extra work. I think, Ken, you guys have been leveraging, just SQA processes, right? To even take credit for that work going on in terms of new product. I don't know if you want to talk to that, but I think it's a phenomenal idea and approach.
Yeah, so we have a, like for example, using our ERP implementation, we have a non-GXP test cycle. We don't view validation. Validation is not just testing. Testing in itself is not a GXP activity. Otherwise, anytime I use Microsoft, Microsoft would have to be under inspection. We would have to transfer our obligation for this signature for QA oversight to Microsoft, and they would have to sign off on it. That is not the case, right? So what we do is we test using tools, technology, modern. We have things that use AI, for example, that do visual comparison, automation, and we test very robustly. We test to break. When it becomes the compliance activity, that is when we look at it and we say like, hey, I have a trace matrix. I want to look at what was done. And say like, yes, okay, we'll sign off on that. And that verification, that is the compliance. Because at that point, I'm saying this is enough. This meets my intended use. We can do that. We have both the business process and the functional levels covered. And that in itself is already in, Annex 11, right? It says treat your IT like analogously to your suppliers. That concept is already there. And it's something that, allows us to move forward, use the best in breed technology, adopt things faster. Because the only way that actually we make, systems better for the public health, for product quality is actually, from a computer system, is to test more, right? To have the better software engineering practices, and testing could be that code review. It's the whole and throughout its entire life cycle. That validation is just the higher level. Does this work? Does this work for me? Does it fulfill my business need? So.
Yeah, and when I'm conducting an inspection, I'm looking for the data to support that whatever you're doing, whether in this case being software, works consistently, reliably, reproducibly to do what it is it's intended to do. And it's not my expectation that you go and reinvent the wheel, that you do all the same work that was already done to get to the point where that software package was put together. I like to say, don't reinvent the wheel. If you're buying a wheel for your car, you want to make sure you're buying the right wheel. It's the right size. It can hold the weight, and you're going to make sure that it works on your vehicle. But you're not going to go out and reinvent the wheel because it already exists. So if you can leverage that information, and it's used to support what you're doing, and it's scientifically sound, then I personally have no issues with that when I come across that. But if you're trying to reinvent the wheel, then you've just basically duplicated someone else's work. And the question then is that value added? For me, I'm not going to have an objection to you doing twice as much work as you actually need to do. If you want to do all the double work, yeah, by all means. But what I'm looking for to ensure that the product has quality. Now, if it's for some reason you've deemed it a requirement to duplicate that work again, and there's a rationale for that, by all means, have fun, have a retreat, if you like those types of things. But I'm thinking, okay, how is this value added, and how is this going to impact patient safety? So again, knock yourself out, but our job is to make sure you're meeting the regulation, and sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel to do that.
Seneca, I'm going to ask a question. I know there's some questions coming in, but I'm going to ask you one question. It might take a little longer, but if you can give me a short answer, because some questions are coming up. You go into a facility, right? And you hear someone talking about, yeah, we do unscripted testing. What's your first reaction?
My first reaction is, what does that mean? Explain to me what that means. Explain to me why it is okay. I'm a person about, I think the nomenclature, people get stuck on the nomenclature of what we call things, right? I will never go in and start with the question, show me your validation. My question is, show me what it is that you did to make this happen. Now, because one, you may not even have the concept, and I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but the person I'm speaking to may not even have the concept that they need a validation, or they need something, or they need whatever you want to call that word, right? Some type of system of assurance. I'm looking to see what you know and what you did. So my first question would be, well, what does that mean? And then after you explain that to me, I would say, well, can you tell me how that meets the requirement of 21 CFR ... or this, I wouldn't probably go that specific, but how does that meet the requirements of CGMP regulations? And have them explain it to me.
Thank you, sir. All right, we have some questions coming up. So, and by the way, yeah, we need to totally switch off from our presentation to questions. So, are inspectors asking for access to review data on their own? That's it.
I'm not sure, but we as investigators, we do ask to review data. We'll ask, yeah, and it really just depends on what prompts us. So we're not going to just walk in and say, show me all your data. Because again, going back to what I was saying earlier, that's not necessarily value added, right? And I don't want to go and check every single piece of data in the facility when I could be focusing on checking the data that may really matter. And so it's generally based on the way the system is set up. When I may say the system, not just computerized system, but the company. Problems, issues that may arise, deviations that occur, those types of things are generally what prompt us to ask for questions. But we do look at data, and the data should be in order, of course. But we're not, at least I never have in my career gone in and said, just show me some data.
Cool. All right, I think this question could be to either of you or the three of you gentlemen. For COTS or out-of-the-box tools such as LIMS, would you expect to be able to see a complete record, including the audit trail where the metadata collected can be very complex and the vendor claims to be Part 11 compliant based on being able to provide screenshot? Is the question clear, or I can repeat it? Or you guys can
Well,
see.
I don't know if you repeat it, I'm going to get any more out of the question. I'm trying to make sure I understand where it's going, right? For COTS such as LIMS. So again, I'm going to go back to the idea that the system, if it's already keeping its own record and audit trail, you know, it is up to you as the manufacturer to decide how you're going to use that as part of your system of control, right? And that becomes part of determining then, is there any additional effort that's required, right? If the vendor claims it's Part 11 compliant and you have confidence in the vendor, or you reviewed data, you've seen other things from them, that's a, you know, and it's an acceptable thing to put as part of your, you know, your evaluation and say, here's why and what I'm going to do in addition. The idea of compliant based on being able to provide a screenshot, I'm not 100% sure where that's going, right?
Yeah, same here. But we can move on just to make sure that we answer.
I'll just
Go
say,
ahead, Seneca.
if that, it really depends on what that screenshot is showing. I'm not quite sure what value that provides. But if it can provide a value, that's one thing. And then number two, one interesting thing I always like to point out, because it's talked about in our guidance, that Part 11, when we're doing inspections and we're looking at data integrity, it's not really that much about Part 11. Like, we're looking at the predicate rules, the 210, 211, 820s. We're looking at those requirements. And so just because someone says we're Part 11 compliant, like, that doesn't necessarily mean, I don't want to say it doesn't mean a lot, but the next question is, so what? They say it's Part 11 compliant, but does that software meet your intended use? And that's where the focus we're looking at. We're focused on, because it's like I'll use this another thing. An oven works to keep things hot, or it works to heat things up, and you can validate the crap out of an oven. You can have all the documentation to support it, but if you try to use it as a refrigerator, it's kind of, you know, all that data is useless. But my point with that is, if you're any kind of software, you should just be able to prove that you trust that that software works and that it works as intended for your particular use.
And this one, I would expect to get the complete record. And if you can't get it because the audit trail and metadata is so complex and your intended use is not that you got a log as opposed to an audit trail. That's it, but I would always expect that. I'm just looking at that, the convoluted question.
And good, going back to that point, if, you know, forget about, again, take a moment to think about the 99% of the time that I'm not there. And that's kind of, I'm doing an inspection, but I'm there probably less than a fraction of 1% of the year, right, in a facility. My job is to see what you're doing and to do a snapshot in time. Going back to what I was saying earlier and what Ken highlighted on, if your system, your metadata and your audit trail is so confusing that I can't understand it and you can't understand it,
That's a problem.
You know, then that, yes, as you said, that definitely can be a problem.
Actually, I want to talk about that spin, Ken, that you're looking at in terms of that question, right? If they're asking in terms of how they would accept information from a COTS supplier, right? Would they accept the screenshot as proof of, or expect to see all the, data and audit trail and everything else that's going on there. And again, always better to have that information set versus the screenshot. But if you're not able to get it, again, it goes back to what is your intended use, and is that even relevant information for your intended use?
This is a good question here. Does FDA ever request vendor documentation if during due diligence there may be gaps in CSV/CSA, and best option for an organization would you expect them to provide a rationale for accepting these gaps and or mitigate those gaps?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, is if there's an issue that's outside of that particular manufacturer's control that causes an issue that we would look at during an inspection. It kind of goes back to a company doing its due diligence to support the idea of, is this adequate for intended use? If you're selecting a software, a supplier of an excipient, an API, a screw, or wherever it is you might be using to manufacture a product, the requirement is that you take that you understand your process and that your process produces a product that has quality. And so my question to them would be, how do you know this and how do you trust it? And then if there was issues that were upstream of the manufacturing, my question would be, why were those issues not caught? Why were those issues not identified when you were implementing this software for the purpose of what you're going to use it for? So yes, there are things that can occur upstream, but the idea, and when I say upstream, I mean from the supplier of that software. But those things should be identified when you are when you've decided to use the software for your intended use. And so when you're doing your whatever that testing, the scope of your testing is, or your analysis of that software for its intended use, those things should be captured. And if they're not captured, then that's where the next question would be, why weren't they captured?
I think that's the big piece of what we would be looking for, right? I think going back to the idea that FDA is not in the software validation business for these tools, right? That's not what we're in. We're in the risk business. You're using this software, you're using this tool, you know it's got gaps. The question then becomes, do those gaps present a risk to your product or the patient? And if they do, then we talk about how are you, making sure that those gaps mitigate that risk down the road. But it's that fundamental understanding. If those gaps aren't presenting that risk and it's something you as a business choose to take on, then that is your business choice. But the question is going to come back, have you assessed that those gaps do not impact your overall product risk? And that's really where the focus of our investigation is going to be. And I can tell you, I would never be looking to see that, for the volumes of information they throw at investigators here for these software validation activities, when vendors do it, it is like DVDs worth of information that they send over. And I know, not looking at that to begin with. So it is a different scope.
Gentlemen, we have 1 minute left, and I know we can go on for 2 hours or probably a lot more because there's tons of questions coming in. We'll try our best to respond to those at a later time. But really, I definitely want to take this opportunity to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. And I want you to leave us with a last word to the industry, whether it's CSA, whether it's data integrity. So please, Cisco, start it up for us for the last.
I'd like to leave with the last words of, see, it's not just me. Seneca's here too. And go from there. But again, I'm in all seriousness, right? This isn't a topic or a shift that people should be panicking about, right? All we're trying to do is provide more effective interpretation of that, that direction, that map to get to that destination, because people were struggling with it beforehand. They were really taking the long way around when we're saying, hey, there's a shorter, more direct route. So hopefully this helps you understand that this isn't complex. We're allowing a lot more flexibility in that space. And the idea of data integrity and the CSA efforts, they are intended to support each other, but stop confounding the two activities, because that's where you start to really find opportunities to mess up. Because really, it's all it is.
I would say that that guidance is good. Guidance provides directions, not directions, but more of a well, you can say guidance on what to do. But FDA has has spelled out what the requirements are in the regulations and in FDA Act. And those are there, and those are the things that companies are required to meet. How you do that is really up to you. And people ask me all the time, so what would you do? How would you do it? I'm like, well, one, I'm here to ask the questions. Number two, I don't want to tell you how to do it, because number one, you should always know more about what you're doing than me. I've been in a lot of facilities all over the world, but I always hope that the person sitting across the table knows more about the business than me. So I don't want to give advice for that, for specifics. But if I was to give advice, it would always be the same thing that our guidance says. Take a risk-based approach. Think about how you can mitigate risk, and how and the so what. How does this particular thing match up with what I'm planning on doing? And I can almost guarantee you that any other guidance that comes out from the agency will basically say the same thing in different ways.
Thank you, Seneca. Much appreciated. And thank you for joining the dark side here, the fixer guys. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I have a thing I say during almost every inspection is that we're all on the same side, and unless you're on the wrong side. But hopefully we're all on the same side, because our ultimate goal when I do an inspection is not to penalize or to write companies up. It's to make sure that consumers, the public, is safe. And I believe that's the goal of almost everyone I sit across from. So I believe we're all in the same team.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Ken, last words?
I think we need to apply critical thinking and look at our business practices from bottoms up, because right now there is a tendency to cling to practices and hide behind them, whether I won't move forward till this guidance comes out, I won't do this. In Part 11 itself, right? You can use the extent and stringency of controls by any factor you choose, which was already saying, you have that liberty. And why I say that is there's an amount of upskilling that's need to occur, because our business practices, the way that we test, is very, very inefficient, and it is not in the best interest of the patient, product quality, safety, when we're behind because our validation doesn't enable us to move forward. We bypass things that will increase data integrity because of the perceived regulatory burden, when there is no, nothing that specifically, there's no predicated requirement for that. You look at QA signature, you look at statistical programming of the biostatisticians, typically two programs, independent programming. There's not that QA oversight of that. QA controls it at the process level, saying, hey, these are the procedures, and I approve it. So it's one of these things where we need to take a step back, look at the practices, question everything, and then implement something that's going to work, that's going to enable the increase in quality that all other sectors are getting. We are behind the times. I don't know, other companies are saying like, well, we won't upgrade until we're about to fall off support, and then it's a mad dash. And if it's a mad dash, it's not going to be done well. And there's so many different ways that I can show something is working. I can show you metrics, I can show you my processes work, I can show you data. If there's a question on, like I did an unscripted test case, there's no screenshot, or there's no screen, I can show you in the system. I can go to production. Hey, let me show you it works. Let me show you, we're doing the val environment. Let me show you it works. Let me show you in the audit trail that we tested. There's so many different ways that you can do it. So I want us to apply that critical thinking.
Thank you. And to our audience, thank you very much. I think beside having these gentlemen speak and really confirm what we've been talking about and what GAMP has been talking about. Really, there's a lot of material out there. It's not just online. It's not just Google. There is actual documentation and guidance. GAMP 5, second edition is coming up. Good practice guide on data integrity by design as a CSA appendix. Please take a look at it. There is another good practice guide on enabling innovations. Again, crossing our fingers, right, gentlemen, about the CSA guidance coming up. And remember, when the CSA guidance come up or gets released, this is not it. It's going to wait for your feedback and comments and public comments to come up. And hopefully Cisco, myself, Seneca will be doing a webinar just specifically to celebrate the release of it. But now we're going to beg you to please do your due diligence as an industry, because this is for us, the industry, right? We want to do the right thing, and we need the help. We have the help. We have the FDA support. These two gentlemen here, they're not off the clock. I mean, they're really helping us. They're here for a reason. Please take a survey. We will try our best to respond to the questions that came in and we could not answer live. But again, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Seneca, Cisco, Ken, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
All have a good day. Thank you. I think we have to exit.